natural resources. What we have is a pool of collective insight within ourselves. So once we can continue to show, not just to ourselves, but to our nation, the spirit of our country and who we are, and that we are not just thinking one-minded and one-sided, and it's just about money, but there are many other benefits that can be derived, then we can see the benefit of such a national policy, as the President said, that will once again engender pride and industry into ourselves and into our children. And this is the way that the policy is leading. And Barvin, again, once again, thank you. After 333 years, as was mentioned by you, the Honorable Minister of Commerce, right, we can see the benefits, again, of such a policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maloney. Now, I think, Mr. Maloney, you raised a very important matter there, the National Coconut Stakeholders Platform. Obviously, this is targeted at the development of the coconut industry holistically, not just at the sales or commercial end, which we participate in almost right across the island on a weekly basis. I think that this is a matter that would warm the heart of the Minister of Agriculture. And it certainly is something that I would want to get some more information on. Now, you can either, if you feel that you are in a position to share more information on the National Coconut Stakeholders Platform, at this point, I'd be happy to hear. If you are not in a position to do so now, then I will undertake to liaise with you after, because it is also something that from my own ministry's perspective, it is an issue that we would want to get a greater feel, or certainly I would want to get a better understanding of what you're about and how we could better participate in and assist in the development of this. You would need to tell me though, Mr. Maloney, is it something you would want to elaborate on at this stage, or should we do this at a different point?
Yes, Honorable Minister. Again, there's just many benefits that is documented that can be derived from the coconut sector. So the National Stakeholders Platform, along with Barvin, have engaged in a number of initiatives where we are looking, as you mentioned, to establish certain coconut vending zone, where the coconut would be the main product being played and being sold. That persons can get the delicious water that we are so accustomed to, along with the fresh jelly fruit. So it's all in itself, it speaks for itself, where the industry is a worldwide industry right now. Once we can meet the national standards, and we had some discussions on that, which is quite simple. You need to harvest the coconuts at the proper harvesting time. Can't reap them too small. Proper bottling, sanitizing, labeling, and once you have them refrigerated at the right temperature, then it should be ready for export, where you could export it to any desired market. Again, it is an area that can also benefit us when it comes to climate change. Water is very important. Persons like normal water, but if we could get our children into drinking more coconut water, which is a lot much sweeter along with the jelly, then there's quite a few benefits that can be derived. As I mentioned, the Heart and Stroke Foundation is pushing that initiative. And in the new historic Bridgetown, well, these are things that Barvin would like to see come to fruition, where persons now can engage and have easily access. So we would need, as the feed program, and there are a few programs, food security, all of these things that we are considering on the board, and coconut groves, that a few acres of land be also delegated for the persons that would wish to ply their trade in that industry. So it is something very fruitful, something that can be very productive, not just to us as individuals, but as we can see, it has broader bases and broad benefits that all of us as a whole, as a country, can benefit from. That is my submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maloney. Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, let me start by congratulating the members of Barvin for what I consider to be very important comments to this piece of statute that we are seeking to bring to right a number of the wrongs that took place in vending in Barbados over many decades. However, I wish to note that the conversation as it relates to coconut water and standards, there is a food safety bill that is currently before CPC that will clearly outline the standards to be followed and all practices in terms of bottling, etc., shelf life, those types of things will be captured in that statute. And so therefore I will be more than happy to engage Mr. Maloney and his team, because we're currently doing public consultations with regard to the food safety legislation and our sanitary and phytosanitary legislation and project. So I thought I'll bring that clarity so that Barvin will be aware if they're not so already, but equally for the members of this committee to be aware as well.
Very grateful to you, Minister. So there you have it, Mr. Maloney and Mr. Alexander. The Minister of Agriculture is pointing us to the fact that there will be I almost said a companion piece of legislation, but there will be a piece of legislation which will come from his ministry that will facilitate some of these considerations that we are interested in here. And so you should look forward to some consultation with him and his officers in the not too distant future. It is a good and useful thing, I believe, for the right hand of government to know what the left hand is doing, and this is clearly an opportunity for us to demonstrate that we are working in sync to advance the interests not only of the people of Barbados broadly, but the communities which are involved in farming and vending respectively. Now I'm not seeing any other members who are desirous of the floor, so let me just help us to tighten up this legislation while we have you gentlemen here. There are a couple of things that, as chair of the process, I have had on my mind and I wanted to get your views on. The first, I think, was already spoken to some extent by Ms. Toni Moore when she made her intervention. I just want to go back there very briefly for the purposes of clarity, Mr. Alexander. I understood your answer to her question to suggest that you don't have any particular strong feelings about having a vendor being a representative of the vending community on the basis of his years of experience. You, as I understood what you were saying, Mr. Maloney, for example, would have been brand new to the business or the association, but you saw in him those things, and certainly I've heard in him, in his submissions, those things that make him stand out. And so therefore you did not feel it necessary to tie this to a number of years' experience. Yes. Is that correct, first of all?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, fine. Now, being guided by you, it would therefore mean that we could replace the requirement as we have it in the bill. And I have with me the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, who is the person charged with the responsibility of drafting out this legislation. We could replace this requirement for a number of years' experience, 10 years of experience, with simply making it being a vendor who is nominated by the organization or the organizations, plural, representative of vendors in Barbados. My only concern with that is that there's more than one organization representative of vendors, and I would need to get from you your views on whether you feel that Barvin, for example, and the Association of Wayside Vendors, and any other that might emerge or might exist, could collectively, would it be reasonable to expect that you collectively could nominate a person from amongst you to be the representative on this committee, which would be I'm just trying to get the title of the committee. It would be the National Vending Appeals Tribunal. And that tribunal would be the appellate body, which would be comprised of an attorney at law, a vendor, and a person with knowledge and experience in the business of vending and the operation of markets. And that tribunal would function for about 3 years at a time. It would be appointed by the minister responsible for legal and judicial affairs. And the business of that tribunal would be to hear any appeals. For example, if as minister I suspend somebody's license and the body is aggrieved and feel that the minister didn't act right, so they go and they appeal to this body. Or for example, it may be that the manager of the vending zone may take a certain course of action or make a certain decision that the vendor feels aggrieved by, and he wishes to appeal that. Now, do you feel, therefore, that we could comfortably rely on the associations representing vendors to just recommend from among their body of members a person, howsoever experienced, but a person who they look to, like for example, Brother Barra, who been in this for 50 years, and say, this is a man that we want to represent us.
Right.
Can we do it that way?
Well, first of all, what I challenge me there, to be honest, is how do we select that person? If we're talking about Barvin, obviously, that would be a simple matter. Barvin, through his executive, right, that is what we do, through his executive, would select such a person. But we like to be fair. We don't see Barvin as a colossal, in the sense that there can be no other persons representing vendors, representing their people. No, we do not, right? So we will never disregard for instance, as I have said over and over, the role that Wayside Vendors Association have played, regardless to whatever their membership is at this point in time. We would wish to be in some kind of situation where all who are involved in the representation, that we can have, I don't know, a body of some sort, so we can do these things. It's happening. When I say this, they say life happens, right? This is life. We ain't got everything figured out already. We too much like to pretend that, right? I'm not about that. Barvin is not about that. We are about real things, and this here has now challenged the minds right here of Barvin, right? They know how their president mind thinks for certain, right? And I know that they are all very, very much individuals with their individual mind. You hear how Fox says something opposite to me. That's what is in Barvin, right? But we would want to have a situation where Wayside is not feared because Barvin is representing. We ain't gonna play representation. We ain't waiting on anybody to represent. We're gonna represent. But if anybody step forward or group comes forward, we would want a situation where we are not fighting against one another, but we are working together. As I said, and Robert Maloney would know, right? When one organization wanted to fight us, I was in the paper saying certain things. I said to him, sir, we do not divide our house. We will have no comment. We do not divide our house, and we will move forward with that understanding. So I am not, this is something we have to work out. I would not be that, I would not want that at those types of, at levels where they have more than one, that Barvin alone decides. But if Barvin has to, Barvin will be there to do so.
Well, I'm not
You know?
asking you to do that. I
No.
actually was asking you what you thought about the proposal that you could consult with each other. You are right when you say it is one house.
Right.
But in those house, in that house, there are more than one room.
Yeah, there's more than one.
And so I would want to know that you should be able to consult with the room next door
True.
and throw up a name.
True. And
If that is practical, then we can write the legislation to accommodate that.
Yes,
But
please.
I wanted to hear your views on that first. But
Yes,
before you
yes,
answer,
please.
let me just indicate that I see Senator Wiggins' hand, and I also see Ms. Moore desires to speak again. But I will allow Mr. Alexander to complete his thoughts on this matter. Please proceed, sir.
yeah, I think I have concluded from the, you're quite right. I think we have concluded.
So
on
you
that.
believe that it would be reasonable for us to anticipate that a conversation could take place and between Wayside Vendors and Barvin, a name be agreed upon?
Yes, please.
Okay. Senator Wiggins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And once again, I want to congratulate the Barvin and members that are present there, and obviously congratulate Mr. Alistair Alexandra on his independence honor of a GCM. And as what I was spoken in the Senate previously, I know of him and many of the vendors out there who have been in the vineyard toiling for a long time. So I do sincerely appreciate all your efforts today. To continue from where you left off there with respect, I was thinking that maybe you can form an umbrella body for the sake of this legislation similar to C2SAB, where in terms of theoretically speaking, I'm not sure if practically speaking, that umbrella body similar to C2SAB can be the one voice of the vendors in situations that we're discussing today. And I'm also thinking, as you know, Mr. Chairman, that I would have raised before the whole question of zones. I heard Mr. Maloney speak to the issue of having, correct me if I'm wrong, a zone especially for coconut vendors. But I was thinking when, in terms of zones, that if we have vending zones, that these zones will be of a multi-purpose nature, where you will have fruits and vegetables, you can have clothing, you can have storage, because I do believe that, I know years ago, in the now public market that has been demolished, I think some of the vendors used to store their produce on site. So when we're thinking about these new vending zones, I'm thinking that we can have good physical structures, because Oystins, look at Oystins. Oystins is a prime example of a great vending zone in Barbados, where you have the storage, you have the ice, and you have various vendors. I know it's primarily fish, but you have people there selling jewelry. And then of course you have the other restaurants in the area. And of course, if we're thinking about vending zones, especially off my favorite spot on the ABC highway, you can have, rather than mobile lunchrooms or mobile amenities like toilet facilities, the government should be able to acquire land in some of these areas to physically build these amenities so that the vendors can use. Similarly, amenities can be built, I'm going off script a little bit, these types of amenities, let's say for taxi persons in Bridgetown. So these are the new concepts in terms of going forward, amenities to complement these zoning activities that we're looking at. So once again, I want to thank and compliment the vendors who are here, and I'm wishing you all the best as we go forward in this new step that we're taking. But one other point, Mr. Chairman, I had mentioned it to another member of the committee, but I do feel that maybe the Royal Barbados Police Force, soon to be the Barbados Police Service, should be represented on this committee, because so that you would not have this clash of vendors and police as we go forward. So if the police is actually physically represented on the committee rather than in a consultative role, they can then, when they meet with their association, discuss what has happened at the committee level, and there will not be so much tension with vendors having to produce the license, get up and move on with your produce, and being evicted and their produce being confiscated. So I think that a member of the force should be a permanent member of this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. You said a number of things. Let me just deal with the last one first. I want to remind you that I think I understand what you're saying, but just for the avoidance of doubt, this bill removes the police completely from the process of regulating vending.
Yes.
But having said so, I sense that what you're urging us to do is to have them involved in the consultative way in which the National Vending Committee functions, whereby concerns relating to those things that would ordinarily fall within the scope of regulating anything in Barbados can have their input. So that even though they are not going to be responsible for interfacing with vendors in terms of the day-by-day management of their enterprises or their endeavors, what we would have is the voice of the police, similar to how we have the voice of the wayside vendors and the barvin and the manager of markets, etc., so that discussion, mature discussion, can take place. That's what you're suggesting. And I don't see anything wrong with that. In fact, I think that perhaps is a very good idea. It certainly will change the historical nature of the interaction between the two entities, because I think, as Mr. Alexander indicated from his very opening remarks, the history has been a tortured one, with vendors having to feel as though they were under the heel, so to speak, of the police. And this now brings everybody as equals to sit at a table to discuss matters of mutual concern, which is how we should be treating to this business. So I have no difficulty with that. And in fact, I would want to ask the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel to make a notation of the desirability of having the police sit as part of the National Vending Committee. We will still have to refine the full membership of the National Vending Committee, but I think the idea of having them as part of the parties that discuss these things is desirable. Now, sorry.
Yes, Honorable Minister. We fully support that submission. We have, if possible again, we have here in our midst, for us, a very distinguished gentleman by the name of Leonard Alsop, a man who knows my father, who is a contemporary of my father, and it is because of my father the horrible treatment meted out to my own father that I started the organization Barvin. I promised that day when it is every time I think about it, it is emotionally hard to think of him being put into a police vehicle like a common criminal is really hard. And Mr. Alsop is here. He is a veteran of the struggle. As I said, a contemporary of my father. And I would like him to, if possible, to make some remarks. We talk about the police, you know, and he knows from that time. I think that his submission at this point, if you don't mind, sir.
No, he is
would be
most
great.
welcome. He's most
Right.
welcome, Mr. Alexander.
Mr. Also, your mic is on. Press your mic.
Good afternoon to you, Mr. Chairman,
Good afternoon
Member-
to you.
members of Parliament, and other distinguished guests. This historic bill is very important because it brings back memories of how vending have been. As you may have read or know, vending came from a long way back when people used to be bought from the plantation when they come into town or anywhere to sell their products. Funny thing that the agriculture people are not mentioned in this bill. But those farmers, when they bring the things down to town, they'll be arrested and carried before the law courts, and they will have to pay money. They have come right the way down till you get what you call the Modern Slaughtering Act, which is a permit, which tells you the time you should sell, what products you must be selling, and what time you should leave. The thing is about it is that during my time of vending, which is over 50 years, I have not gone to anything with the police, because you have to have an understanding when you're speaking with people how to speak. And a policeman may come to you and he may not be polite, and when you go to explain to him certain things about your permit or why you're selling without a permit, he may tell you shut up your mouth, and he may be very hostile, which will cause a vendor to act in a different way. And when he said before the law courts, I always ask myself, how is that you could be charged for trying to help yourself by selling, and the same money that you will want to pay your rent or buy food, you have to pay to the court. I used to ask myself that question all the time. That's why I said that this bill is a very piece of legislation that you, the present minister, and the minister before have started to, and the Prime Minister, Mayor Mortley, have been able to, and her cabinet have been able to bring this bill up to where it is now, because it helped clear those misunderstandings that people can sell without being a criminal. And the important part of it that I want to say is that, as I now heard one of my colleagues talk about the store owners, you have to know that the store owner don't want his door blocked or his show window. You would not like it to happen to you. So you must try to avoid yourself in selling without blocking the door, the entrance, or the store windows. And you and the store owner will come to an understanding. You'll find you and the store owner come to understanding where things can go well. I'm telling you because, as I said before, I have been in it 50 years. And I had to learn how to discipline myself. You will find that though you may be privileged to sell when this bill is passed, that you cannot go and fight your brother. He may be there selling for maybe 10 years or 5 years, and because you have the privilege to come and sell, you want to go and fight your brother for spot instead of looking for a space for yourself. And that is what caused the problem. You have to be disciplined to see that that type of thing don't happen. And in that way, you and the police will not have to come to any disagreement, because it is going to involve the police to get that settled. And you have to know to conduct yourself like a business person, because vending is a business, you know. It is a business. You grow from a small vendor, then you find yourself going overseas and bringing goods, and you become a big businessman. So that's how the business starts. See, the agricultural person may bring his fruits down to Bridgetown, he may sell, and later on he got a van and become a big business person. So in all, however you look at it, you are a business person. They used to call it hawker. They used to mark hawker, a badge. And we moved that because that was not a nice word. Vending is good. It's when you look, you may see in the papers, even in law papers, they call it the vending, the vendor. And in papers, you see the talk about the vending or the vendor. So it's nothing wrong with being a vendor. See? It's a very important business, and it should be treated like that.
Agreed.
So therefore, conduct yourself in a disciplined way, and you will be respected. See? Try that when the police come, try to reason with the police. Don't abuse the police. Police may give you some words that you don't like, but you can bite your lips and try to keep back the words. Don't be abusive. And you will find out that you and the police get along well, because I've had some difficult times with an officer who was an inspector. You will know what he's speaking about. And now he's resigned. When you see me, he's the only body who was in Vending that he could speak to, because he have done so much wrong. When the server can't find you, he come and say, "Hey, Franklin, I was looking for you ever since. How are you doing?" And he would take up the summons and say, "This is for you." That's the type of person he was. And he left the force, and people have that business against him. See? So that just shows you how spiteful it could be. You may meet the police, don't want to hear you. You confiscate your goods, throw them in the van. You know, like I read what gentleman who he have passed, and those were the times. See, nobody wants to hear the feel that as long as you is a hawker or you're selling on the streets, that you could be treated anywhere. But this bill here that is present now in Parliament will change all of that. And you, Barvin, and your organization.
And
to
Mr.
try to
Also,
enforce it.
I think that is exactly the point you just made is correct. What we're trying to do is to change all of that. And what I would like to hear now from you, and equally some of the others next to you, is your views about, we have used a lot of fancy language. We say that we have decriminalized this, which means that there will no longer be any criminal penalties. We've taken this completely out of the remit of the police, so that management of the business of vending can be dealt with in the same way that you would deal with, if you have a challenge, for example, with a lawyer. You don't necessarily, though some have been and should be carried to the court, the reality is that you can deal with this through the Bar Association and have a civil dispute resolution process. Now, we are proposing in the page 66 of the legislation. So if you have it in front of you, sir, or if Mr. Alexander has it in front of him or whoever, I don't know how many copies you all have with you. At page 66 of the legislation, you see something called the 7th schedule. And this is penalties. This speaks to administrative penalties. Now, I'm going to invite your comments on this, because I want for you all to understand that gone now forever are the days when a police officer, as you have said, Mr. Alsop, would pick up your things and put you in a van and the things in the van or whatever, and next thing you have to appear in front of a court. But a person who contravenes provisions of this legislation will be liable to pay an administrative penalty. What I am trying to find out from you all are your views about the administrative penalties. The penalties are outlined at page 66. So that, for example, if you're vending without a license, contrary to the section 4, subsection 2 of the legislation, you will pay a penalty of $500. If you're vending with a license that has been suspended or revoked, so in other words, it didn't say that you didn't have a license, but that you had one, you did something wrong and got it revoked, but you still decide that you're going to be spiteful and you're going to vend anyhow, that penalty would be $1,500. You have another one, which would be vending outside of a vending zone. That is $1,500. And you see them there in front of you. What I want, because these are proposals, and what I want to hear from the practitioners, which is you all, is whether you feel that these penalties, first of all, are reasonable, and secondly, if there is a desirability of having the penalties being paid by installment, because in another part of the legislation, which is not immediately at the top of my mind, it says you have to pay within 14 days of the notice that you have infringed and have to pay a penalty. So we were thinking at the level of this committee about that 14 days, and I'm a man that like to be fair. I know that in these circumstances, it may be difficult for some people to pay within 14 days. But I want to hear from you as to what your views are, first of all, on the reasonableness, and then the second aspect would be the desirability of being able to pay off the penalty by way of installment over a longer period of time. The floor is yours, gentlemen, all.
Yes,
Mr.
Honorable.
Chairman, I disagree with the $500 in section vending without a license. It is unfair when you cannot get a license, which we call a permit, to sell and be asked to pay $500 if so charged. I disagree with that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you clearly, Mr. Alsop. Say again, please.
I disagree with selling without a license, having to pay $500 when you cannot get a license, which is a permit.
Let me say, Mr. Alsop, if I may intervene. We are speaking now about a different regime. There was a time, and it still exists in our minds, that there are no license to be given, right? The problem, we never objected to licensing. We wanted license. We were told that it was given the impression, they gave the impression to the population that we just did not want to go and get licenses. And it was never true. We tried, but we could not get licenses. We have a situation now where...
Please elaborate. I'm going to allow you to speak fully.
Right.
But I think the committee needs to understand this, because I certainly don't. Why
Okay.
would you not be able to get a license, sir?
They were not giving us. They were just not giving us. Consecutive administrations were doing the same thing. We're not issuing any licenses, right? And there was a plan. To be truthful, when Barvin started, there was a plan, and it is documented in the media, where they had intended to put all the vendors of Bridgetown into markets, to put all. They made that attempt, okay, even with myself and many others. So it was a straightforward thing.
So,
The-
so, to,
you
so,
know-
to, so to control, so
So
you were
you
not
applied-
being- you applied for a license,
I could not get it.
and the government of the day was saying you cannot get any
They
license.
could not get it. They didn't even say so. You just could not get it.
Not
Right?
giving
And
you
then the
anything.
police will come and ask you, where's your license? And there was no license. And Fox
So
will be
people
able to tell
in
you,
Barbados, Mr. Alexander, because I need to be clear on this matter.
Yeah.
You're saying to me that people in Barbados, working class people, let's be very frank, because
Yeah.
this is not the people that live. I don't think there are many members of Barvin who live at an address called Anybody
No,
Heights
no.
or Anybody Terrace.
no.
Huh?
Yes.
So people from working class Barbados are trying to earn an honest living.
Right.
They apply for a license to vend in the land of their birth. And they're told by a government that is supposed to be administering their well-being that they are not getting any license, full stop.
Full stop. Full stop. There are few persons who were privileged for whatever reason. I mean few. Right? You probably could count them on your hand in the city that had a license. Okay? And Mr. Allsop may have been one of those people who were fortunate enough to have had a license. But he would tell you that the majority of his fellow vendors could not obtain one, right? And we're not talking about that situation. We are talking about a situation now. And two, another thing too, even how to get the license, people didn't even sure which agency, who to get to. You hear all sorts of different things, right? So this is the reality. We are saying, well, Barvin, to be truthful, for licenses to be given. When I met Fox, for instance, I remember Fox said to me, I saw him appear many times before the law court. I saw one newspaper article that carried his story, broke my heart. He said he used to sell drugs. He tell the judge he used to sell drugs. He decided he don't want that. He have children, and he do not want his children to come and see him doing that. And that he wanted to do something else, and he decided on vending. All the doing is criminalizing him. Right? I remember that. When I met him, I said, sir, if you need any assistance, contact me. And he said, sir, Alexander, you can't help me. It was so hopeless at the time. He did not even believe that Barvin, he has fought this struggle for long. I don't care what you do, right? It was one thing. They ain't getting a license, and they're coming for you, right? And Mr. Allsop is saying the same thing. Before Barvin, it was that. And we must introduce, at this point in time, the name of the Honorable Mayor Motley. Barvin made contact with her, and it was a historic meeting. It is at that meeting, she promised, the first meeting, she said, what you are saying, Mr. Alexander, is all true. She said these exact words, I do not believe in Obia, but we were to meet. And all that you are saying in this letter is correct. We must change this, and I will do all in my power to help you. And it is through fighting with her, fighting not against her, with her, that we were able to access these licenses. Robert would be able to. He want to speak on this issue, right? Yes.
Yes, once again, Honorable Minister. Barvin's view on that matter is that we have always viewed permits of the means of maintaining order. And we have fought and had acts on many occasions where we was denied. So once again, rather than we being honest and noble persons looking to provide for our family, we was more looked at as criminals. I remember myself years ago when I was selling the natural juices. I came from America and I was looking to provide for myself. And when I went to, excuse me, when I went to my spot where I had accustomed plying my trade, I was met with 2 officers, I think from the Defense Force or the Royal Barbados Police Force, cannot remember exactly, with some high-powered rifles and telling me move and keep moving. And they cleared the whole streets, and that is when I was able to join the organization Barvin, because I was not desirous for my mother in America to hear that I am a criminal in Barbados. In America, I might have run in a little with the law, not due to things I wanted to do, but that was that story, and I wanted to bring a conclusion to that. Earlier, as we were speaking...
May I ask Mr. Maloney, what was that spot?
The top of Swan Street.
Swan Street?
Yeah, the last street at the top of Swan Street. It was not like on Swan Street, but on the little corner street that was adjacent to Swan Street.
Go ahead.
Yes, and the ministress had mentioned earlier concerning the coconut zones. Yes, I was not indicating that it was strictly for the coconut vendors. I was just saying that would have been one of the highlights, but we know that in any vending zone, that it have to be multifaceted, meaning including many different persons that can be reasonably accommodated to make it attractive and aesthetic to the zone. Thank you very much, sir.
That is understood and appreciated. Okay, and I thank you for that context, gentlemen. The question that I had before you was the issue of the penalties, because those horrible days are over.
Yes, please.
I remember when I introduced this piece of legislation, Mr. Alexander, you will recall, I made reference to the fact that it would have been, I think, about 1800 that people were moved from Swan Street for vending and sent by way of the brutal forces administering these matters at the time to a place called the Shambles. The name speaks for itself. I was not as aware that it was within recent memory that men with rifles and so on would have been treating to folks in Swan Street in the same way.
Yes, please.
It tells its own story.
Well, let me say something. The history, we have to really speak, because these things are like, hidden from all people, although it's happening in public, right? Sir, right? And there's so many people who don't even understand the issues, right? This same gentleman is speaking about this particular policeman. I remember my father was vending at the time by St. George Street, and the policeman told him to move. And my vehicle was there, and I was parking my father. I was trying to get my father loaded up as fast as possible so that he would not be arrested or anything like that. I didn't even know that my father is so cool. I did not know that he had that aggressive side. I heard him said these words, and the first time I knew that my father had been arrested for vending or had any convictions for vending. This will tell you a lot of these things, even although I was in his household, I did not know. He's feeding me, sending me to school. Right? My sister became the commissioner, the first lady commissioner of Inland Revenue, Sabina Walcott Denny. He is who sent her to school. schooled her. And he is saying to me, as I am packing him as fast as I could, I mean, I'm frightened. And I'm packing him in the bar van to protect you, nothing so. And I'm packing my father into the van, his things into the van. And my father says, Alistair, I have 18 convictions for selling. He says, I have 18 convictions, and all is for selling. So take your time. He could do what he wants to do. And that went through my heart. That was the first shot, so to speak, that went through my heart concerning this matter. I know, I believe in the providence of God. I believe in Almighty God. I know that this is a movement of God. And that was my first lesson as to what the reality was. And even I thought about it, and I said, my father has 18 convictions to raise me, to send me school, to do all this that he has done for his children. And it was heartbreaking. And that moment when he was arrested, it was too much. It was just too much. So these are the realities. These are the realities. 18 convictions.
Is it to
And I
your
did not
knowledge,
know.
Alistair?
Yes, please.
Is it to your knowledge that whether or not the convictions that your father would have been saddled with have ever stood in the way of any things that he's attempted to do? For example, obtain a visa or travel, jobs or anything like that?
Well, let me say, I would not know. He have never spoken concerning that matter, but I know that there are vendors who this has happened to them. And
When you say this has happened, what is this?
that they have run into difficulty because as far as the certificate of character is concerned, right? Will have a conviction on it. Right? I know that for a fact. So this is so, right? And we are looking to see that slate cleanse. They call it what? Where's this official term now?
Expungement from the record.
Sir? Yeah. The PRO knows that word well. You got any convictions, sir? Yes, please. All right.
You can take some
Fox
comfort.
say he has 25, so he will let his expunged.
You can take some comfort that
Yes.
this committee has also been looking at the question of expungement from the record.
Thank you, sir.
And though I cannot say definitively at this stage, I don't want you to leave here thinking that I have said definitively.
Yeah.
But certainly, we are all gathered here so inclined.
Robert Maloney would like to say something again, but let me let Valentino Barrow speak on the penalties.
Yeah, I wanted us
he's-
to come back to the penalties,
Yeah,
please.
he was speaking on other things, but he wants to speak on the penalties.
I presume by now it's afternoon.
You put on the mic.
Yes, it is afternoon. It is
Okay,
afternoon.
good afternoon.
afternoon to you.
I really had a lot to say, but Barvin and its executive is so close. When the president speaks, he could actually speak for us all, because we are all in one accord, as it was said in the Bible. I reviewed this policy last night. I had attempted to do so prior, but due to what is going on with the business and other relevant matters pertaining to the vendors, I didn't get the opportunity to fully review it, but I took the opportunity last night. I want to say that when I was a youth with my granddad selling bread, if a lot of you are young, you might not remember the bread carts in those days, way back in the days of old. I was very observant. And a lot of atrocities, indignities mentioned by previous members of the association that spoke. It's true. And all I could do now is add fuel to fire, as they would say. I remember as a little boy, around the age of 12, a young lad, on the premises of Fairchild Street Market, I would see a lot of confusion sometimes, and I realized that police and people scuffling, people taking flight. Some would go, knew some, a run for the money, where they were fleeing, trying to evade capture. And I not want to put things to my own understanding, ask my granddad, like in Bajan terms, why don't people do that? Again, so he said, well, maybe they're not legal, they don't have a license to sell, or they shouldn't be selling there. He leave it at that, but I pondered upon it. And then as becoming older, I going now to a different institution of training, Polytechnic in those days. And I passed in the bridge on more than one occasion within the vicinity of the city. I noticed such atrocities being committed. In my opinion, I deemed them atrocities. I would see fruits, vegetables, as my wife has said, being skedaddled into the river, trod in the pond. Some even end up in the road and cars got to try to shift. And people, as I said prior, taking flight to evade capture because it was not a civil penalty as is being proposed in this bill or this policy. It was criminal. And I walked again and I think about all these things because, as I said prior, I had selling in my veins. Although it was very good when going to the Polytechnic, I wasn't a brainchild, but relatively bright, I still had selling in my veins. I wanted to be involved in sales. I said, well, look, let me tell you, I got to look away because I can't see myself running this way. I can't see myself incurring all these things that I considered, through my view of a youthful eye, as wrong. But as I reviewed this policy last night, I noticed from STEM that a lot of these, if not all, the dignities have been addressed. We live in an imperfect world, and I never and will never believe in perfection, except maybe when we die, if there is that place that people refer to. But I have noticed that this addressed many of the indignities, the atrocities committed on people deemed hawkers or vendors. One, no more criminal penalties irrespective of the contravention of the criteria or policies or protocols laid out in this national vending bill. You now have civil penalties. Although I want to put it out there that this is not a reason for people who set their sights on vending for whatever calling, whether it's to substitute their economical viability, whether or not it's because of loss of a job or opportunity, lack of opportunity, whether or not it's just because, as I am, they have selling in the blood. Everything is laid out here according to my understanding, my minute understanding. Everything is laid out here where they can follow the criteria. They can know now, they don't have to guess where to go in relation of what type of vending they want to pursue, whether it be occasional, vocational, as my friend would say, a member of the executive, career vending, or you just want to supplement the income. It is all addressed within the pages of this proposed policy. And like, pardon? And like anything else, it might need a tidbit treating as we go along to see how feasible it is, as we actually experience it in the working or the rolling out thereof. As far as the question pertaining to the amenities that Barvin would like to see in vending zones, that also, I realize, have been addressed, and certain amenities suggested, at least the basics that are there. Covering for the vendor, which would be a kiosk of some design for the vendor and the produce or the wear. Proper facility to, how should I put it, relieve yourself from nature's call, and to sanitize, and I'm sure that patrons too could utilize. And those are two of the basic factors. One of the other things mentioned is storage. And I presume that would be according to the vending zone and the type of vending that is being done. Whereas whether it is just a standard storage or where it would include refrigeration. So I'm getting to that. I wanted to address that as well. As far as the penalties are concerned, I see the bill as also leading to organizing the sector and vending. So hence, the penalties are a deterrent, as are most penalties. I think that's the intended purpose of them.
That's right.
The amounts, I cannot really comment on the amounts. I figure the amounts are geared to deterring the individual from contravening the protocols and the criteria set out. As far as the question pertaining to if there should be forthwith within 14 days, I beg to differ on that. And I think especially in these times or any times, we have to look at a little leniency in there, because we do not want failure to pay the penalty. You would then incur another penalty on that. So we, or in my humble opinion, I would suggest that it be broken down, especially in light of these environmental conditions and economical conditions. It could be broken down to a level that would make it more, how should I put it, feasible to the vendor to be able to pay.
More manageable.
More manageable is the word, yes. That they'll be able to pay. And they don't have to go there and do something in an effort to get it, to find themselves in more, how should I put it?
Understood.
A serious position.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Barrow, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
I think that your presentation has been very fulsome and very direct and helpful as far as I'm concerned. We have been looking at these matters, as I said to you, and I think we now have a good grasp on where and how we can proceed. My thinking at this stage, colleagues, is that we should pause, take lunch, and come back after lunch, continuing with the Barvin. I'm hoping, Mr. Alexander and colleagues, that you all can join us for lunch and that you can come back at 2 o'clock. I promise not to keep you for very long after 2 o'clock, because there is another entity that has to make its appearance before the committee. But there are still one or two things that I'm sure that we need to tidy up before you go. And I believe that there may still be one or two others. Mr. Prescott has just joined us. I welcome him. I tried in your absence, Mr. Prescott, to raise those matters which I know you had voiced before. But if there are some others that you may wish to canvass before the Barvin members, then you're free to do so after lunch as well. But that is my proposal, that we take lunch now. It is 1/4 the hour, and that we come back in 45 minutes, and that Mr. Alexander, Maloney, Mr. Barrow, Mr. Greenidge, and Mr. Alsop, all of you gentlemen, we would be delighted if you would join us downstairs for lunch at this point. Thank you. Can I have a motion that we suspend until 2 o'clock, please?
So moved, sir.
Minister Humphrey, I'm grateful. Seconded by Minister Ford. We stand suspended until 2 o'clock.